Good morning and welcome once again to the coverage of YCS Madrid, the third YCS in Europe of the year, and the first one after the World Championship where we have a brand new format. I'm your host for the weekend, Oliver Gurman, and joined by Matt Bell from the Konami offices in, well, London, Windsor.
Yeah, hey guys, how you doing? Good morning.
The big story going into the weekend was that just 4 weeks ago at the World Championship, Infinities took it all down, but we didn't expect them to pop up in huge numbers today. Instead, the three new archetypes that were introduced in the latest release, Duelist Alliance, have made an impact on the competitive scene.
It's been giant. We're seeing lots of Shaddolls, Statellos, and Burning Abyss. These were our three top picks coming into this tournament because of just how strong these teams are straight out of Duelist Alliance.
Yes. Speaking of how strong, we thought they would dominate the field. However, it seemed like some of the older archetypes are not they shouldn't be discarded just yet.
No, there's still plenty in contention that are still performing extraordinarily well.
Yes, we have seen a couple of Mermail decks do quite well. Lightsworn was just shortly after Burning Abyss, also putting up some strong numbers. And other decks we saw in the competition today, or yesterday, is Spellbook, Bujin, Madolche, Evil Swarm. So there's the field is still wide open. It's a not that well-defined format, and there's lots of room for innovation. For our first match today, we have picked two of the household names in the building. We got Joshua Schmidt on the one hand. Ever since his, I don't really want to say breakout performance, but when he did make it to the top 4 of the European Championship back in 2011?
Was it 2012? It was Tokyo he played in the World
Okay,
Championships.
2012. Ever since, he's been on a roll, has been topping event after event. On the other side of the table, we got Federico Zoppini from Italy, also a player super experienced and has won a YCS, runner-up in a YCS, so he's also one of the biggest names in the field that we have. Both of these players are going with Shaddoll.
Yes, we're seeing two Shaddoll. Joshua Schmidt playing Artifact Moraltac, 3 copies in his deck, along with 3 copies of Artifact Sanctum. No Artifact BL-tax, it's just straight Moraltac, hoping to make the most off of the disruption from that. It'll be interesting to see how that works out in a Shaddoll mirror match, because against cards such as Winra, Artifact Moraltac can't destroy it in battle, and it also can't destroy it by its effect. But it does have the opportunity to make a lot of disruptive plays against constructs.
He's running Mathematician. We talked about that yesterday, that people keep discussing if Armageddon Knight or Mathematician is the way to go, or sometimes even both. We have seen that a couple of times.
Yeah, we've seen people deciding they wanted the 4th copy of Mathematician and have played the Armageddon Knight, or some people that wanted more Armageddon Knights and added Mathematicians in.
Yes.
I think we're ready to get started, actually.
Right. The players are already sitting on the table, waiting for us to start. And let's do them this favor. You see Federico on the left side and Joshua on the right.
I'll just get these hands up for you as soon as they load in. In the Shaddoll mirror match, you never want to be the first guy to put the fusion card down unless you have the Vanity's Emptiness to back that up. Okay, Joshua's hands coming in first. Got Breakthrough Skills, Sinister Shadow Game, Shaddoll Beast, and Foolish Burial. And a Shaddoll Fusion, starting with Shaddoll Fusion.
The most important card in the deck, basically.
Yes, although if he plays ahead and plays his Shaddoll Fusion very, very soon, he's going to give his opponent the opportunity to play Shaddoll Fusion for free.
So do we expect to see a war of attrition between these two players?
Yeah, that seems to be the case, especially with Shaddoll. It's going to be a case of playing your fusion spells when it's safe, when your opponent's not going to get a massive advantage from doing so, because the whole game can break from a single free fusion.
Yes. I've seen Alpay Engin playtesting this, the mirror match specifically, because he was expecting to see this quite a bit, and he went as far as tributing his special summoned monsters just to make sure that the opponent wouldn't get the free fusion.
Yeah, it's having a way of actually making sure that your opponent doesn't get that is absolutely vital in this match.
Yeah.
For Federico, we're actually seeing Super Polymerization, Solemn Warning, Eclipse Wyvern, Armageddon Knight, Burst Rebirth, and Shaddoll Hedgehog.
Now, this is one of the stories of the weekend. How many copies of Super Polymerization should you be running in the main deck? And we've seen everything. We've seen players that go with 0 copies, just like Joshua Schmidt does, in fact. And we've seen players who played as a one-off, like as a silver bullet in certain matchups, ready to introduce a second and a possible third copy from their side deck in between games. And we have also seen players like Umut Seren yesterday,
Yeah,
and in fact Federico Zoppini as well,
playing
who,
free
yes,
copies.
so maxing out on that card. So there's a wide disarray in the community how playable this card is and how good it is. It can decide games all on its own, but we saw it yesterday in the Mermail Mirror, not in the Mermail Mirror, but in the match against Mermail, where it seemed like a dead card for.
Yeah, it looked like one of the cases of it's essentially you play the polymerization, you discard a card, you then fuse 2 of your own cards to make Windra, or if you've got the light in hand, make the construct. It's basically investing 4 cards in right there into the one monster.
Yes.
And because of its quick play status, it was being used in the battle phase to press through extra damage and was allowing games to be won before the opponent gained a turn.
Right. So Federico comes up with Armageddon Knight, and it seems like Joshua responded right there with Sinister Shadow Games.
Yes, it was Sinister Shadow Games.
So he flipped his Falco to send something to the graveyard? No.
Yes, we were actually talking, and I didn't quite catch the entirety of the sequence of plays, but Joshua Schmidt currently holding a Shaddoll Beast, Shaddoll Fusion, Blackluster Soldier, and Sinister Shadow Games.
I think he was chaining the card to the Armageddon Knight.
The flip summon of Shaddoll Beast being negated by Solemn Warning does not want Joshua getting through his deck any further.
So it's back to Joshua, who just drew for his turn, and he drew into a second copy of Sinister Shadow Games. It's actually his third copy, right, with the one in the graveyard?
Yes, that's right. He's seen all 3 of the copies of this extraordinarily powerful trap, giving you the ability to send any Shaddoll from your deck to the graveyard, activate it, and use your flip effect in your opponent's turn without them attacking your monster.
Yeah. I mean, that we've talked about Shaddoll Fusion quite a bit. How important is Sinister Shadow Games in this deck?
Anytime somebody explains that they're not playing 3 copies, I don't understand it. It's just so good. You get people questioning, maybe I should only play 2 copies, but I don't see why at this stage you wouldn't just play the 3 copies. It's like you're allowed to play 3. This card is crazy in this deck. A card that we've not seen too much of, Shaddoll Core. This trap card allows you, when you're making your fusion summons, to use it as any attribute. So you can get El Shaddoll Construct off of it, even if you don't have any light monsters. And when it's sent to the graveyard, you can get back a Shaddoll Spell and Trap. So you can get back the fusion spell without your Shaddoll Construct actually being destroyed. So if your opponent's even still trying to play around sending your monsters to the graveyard, you can still get back your fusion and try again next turn.
It sounds like a card that rarely leaves you in a bad position, actually, because it seems so flexible.
It's also a trap monster,
Yeah.
so you can...
why would you not run it?
As a single one-off copy, I guess people are maybe called out on space for not using it.
Then again, we have seen a deck with 54 cards yesterday.
Yeah, so and that deck is doing extraordinarily well. I believe it's still in competition.
Yes. In fact, we will have more numbers for you later on, how many players are still remaining in competition at this point, and which guys are at the very top of the field. We will have that in between rounds or at the start of the second round today. We are only going to play 2 Swiss rounds, and after that we cut to the top 32 players. Now, we mentioned the second Sinister Shadow Games, excuse me, and Joshua is activating it once again during his opponent's turn, and Federico was like shaking his head for a little bit.
Yep. And it's a Shaddoll Beast. So he's also sent from his deck Shaddoll Squamata, which will allow him to send an additional Shaddoll from his deck. So he's getting through that deck extremely fast.
It certainly appears like Joshua is far ahead at this point in time.
Yeah. Just a quick question, I think, on the...
Yes. Once again, we have one of the... It's not so much a translation issue in this particular scenario, because I really can't imagine both of these players not being familiar with all of the cards in their decks. It was more a question of timing, I guess, like when to draw, when gets what sent to the graveyard.
what order does the chain go in?
Yeah.
And Shaddoll Beast offering a lot of options to Joshua Schmidt as he gets to draw 2 cards and discard a card.
Yeah, he didn't even shuffle in between the searches because everybody knew, okay, he's just going to access his deck right away again.
Yeah.
This is one of the things that makes this deck so good. You can always just look for the one piece that you need the most. And we've seen that yesterday in the 54 card deck. I think it was Paolo Pacciana, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he's playing the combo of Burning Abyss and Shaddoll.
Shaddolls, yes. You can, of course, watch that game once again in the Twitch channel if you just go to past broadcasts and check it out once again. It was quite a show. But we've had other matches yesterday that were quite crazy, with a Monarch deck going up against Shaddolls in round 1.
Ah, I just saw the double Cyclone in there, making use of has the double up effect of being able to use the Artifact Morale tax whilst taking out your opponent's spell and trap cards.
So that seemed, at first the group around Joshua Schmidt told me that this was their hot tech for the weekend, that they were going with the double Cyclone, just because of the all-important play where you go for Shaddoll Fusion, your opponent flips Vanity's Emptiness, card we've seen a lot this weekend, and then you just chain the double Cyclone to not only destroy your own copy or your own activated spell card that's currently on the field, the Shaddoll Fusion, but also the opponent's Vanity's Emptiness to make sure that your effect actually resolves.
Interesting thing here. I can see why he's playing double Cyclone because he's playing the artifacts, but if you weren't playing the artifacts, he's not maxed out on copies of Mystical Space Typhoon. He's got 3 copies in his side deck. It kind of feels like your double Cyclone would always be your 4th Mystical Space Typhoon in that scenario, but taking the artifacts in consideration, it's an excellent card because not only do you get to take out the Vanity's Emptiness, but you get your extra level 5 that can disrupt your opponent as well.
Right. Very interesting pick from that team. It sounded to me at first when they told me yesterday that it was in fact their 4th MST.
Yeah.
So Federico on the left, pondering over his options.
And for you guys wondering at home what his options are, he's got an Eclipse Wyvern, White Dragon, Wyver Buster in his hand. And we have an Armageddonite, Burst Rebirth, Super Polymerization, and Shaddoll Hedgehog face down on the field for him. And we're going to see a Super Polymerization, choosing 2 of his opponent's monsters.
Yeah, it seems like a good trade.
It does, but he triggers both of his opponent's Shaddoll effects, so... you're going to see Shaddoll Beast drawing a card and Shaddoll Falco just being set straight back on the field. So it looks a lot better than it actually is.
So he special summoned Shaddoll Winda.
Yes, he's going to be able to take out the face down. I believe it's Shaddoll Falco. Yeah, it should be Shaddoll Falco. And Joshua only has a Shaddoll Core, although he's definitely trying to.
That's the
Well, it's
mathematician.
his turn. So.
What is he going to send to the graveyard? He's also running 1 copy of Felice Lightsworn Archer, which can be quite good in certain scenarios, but that's not what he's going for here.
Yeah, because the Winra can't be destroyed by card effects, it's, the dragon. He's going to send Shaddoll Dragon to the graveyard to go after his opponent's spell or trap zone, leaving Federico with no back row defenses.
Now we're going to see the Shaddoll Fusion, I take it.
Yeah, he's going to play his free copy of Shaddoll Fusion in this situation.
That's also a very interesting story of when fusion monsters first came out, they you had to come up with a big investment to bring a big fusion monster to the field. They were among the strongest monsters in the game, but you had to invest so much that it was often too much to play at a competitive level. Nowadays, we've basically seen the evolution of fusion monsters in synchro monsters, which are basically the same thing. You have 2 monsters on the field and you can use them to bring out another one, and you don't need the polymerization. With Shaddolls, they are taking it 1 step further. You only need the fusion card, and you can get the
if
free.
Your opponent sets you up, then yes. Breakthrough skill being very important here. Shaddoll Falco was already special summoned back to the field, so the Winra's effect that only allows Joshua to special summon once per turn would prevent him from activating the Shaddoll Fusion. And so he uses his in-graveyard breakthrough skill to negate it so he can make sure he resolves this free fusion spell. And he did send Artifact Morale Tack to the graveyard, giving away some of his deck tech to Federico.
Well, at this point, isn't it safe to assume that Federico will know exactly what Joshua is holding on, or playing?
Based on how high they're sat on the tables, there's a good chance after he finished his match he just looked left and saw what he was playing. I mean, that
Yeah.
happens all the time.
Or he just went up against one of the friends of Joshua.
Yeah, and who's playing a very similar build. Yeah, I'll just pull this card up for you.
So yeah, that's the card that is currently keeping Federico in the game, the Shaddoll Winda.
Although we're going to see a battle of these free fusions because there is a Shaddoll Hedgehog set down on Federico's side of the field, which he can flip up and find his own Shaddoll fusion. Oh no, we're going to see Blackluster Soldier coming down.
Is Joshua looking to wrap things up here?
Yeah, he's going for the banish because he's anticipating the Shaddoll Hedgehog. Excellent play by Joshua Schmidt. Definitely worthy of his title, of his high standings in the World Championships in Tokyo. Third place finish, I believe. And now Federico's in a terrible position. He has absolutely no way of answering this giant field, and that is... there's more than enough damage to wipe him out next turn.
He draws for his turn and he finds... It seems like a soul charge. Was it a soul charge?
Quite possibly.
He immediately went for his
it's
graveyard.
super polymerization.
Oh, it's a super polymerization. Well, he does have one more card in hand, so he can actually activate it.
Although his opponent only controls 2 light monsters.
Ah.
So he doesn't have a fusion that lets him do that because he's got no Shaddoll monsters.
Right.
So if his opponent actually committed anything else to the field, the super polymerization could take out the Blackluster Soldier and the other Shaddoll monster, but if Joshua just decides to attack, this game is just about over.
Is there anything that Federico can do rather than just like bluffing a face down card and
well,
hoping
he
for
can summon the White Dragon Wyvern Buster in defense mode, but Blackluster Soldier can just attack that,
just
attack
gonna
again.
attack over it. So
And then you've got 5800 and just a construct and the Blackluster and then Mathematician.
So we don't really see a way of getting out of that situation. I mean, I think if he had a fusion, he would have gone for it right away.
Yeah, I mean, if he summons a White Wyvern Buster, he can attack over the Mathematician. We'll give Joshua another card, but then he's in attack mode. Blackluster does exactly what we just said.
Yes.
Attacks again, and then a construct finishes the duel. So it's a rock and a hard place here.
It's interesting. Like, also, do you decide to just shuffle up right now, or do you give your opponent the extra information and like play on, set a card or something?
I'm trying to see if there's anything. Well, I don't have the contents of his graveyard if he's got to play out of there, but all Joshua has to do is attack. He can't put the Wyvern Buster in defense mode to try and force the Blackluster Soldier to use its banishing effect. So he's got no way of convincing Joshua to give him an extra turn. He can set the super polymerization and pass and hope his opponent commits a single Shaddoll monster. Okay. Oh, it's a Shaddoll monster and a black... Sorry, I completely misunderstood.
So he does have a target.
I thought the requirement was a Dark Shaddoll for some reason. Sorry, it's been a long weekend, so...
Right. So he does have a perfect out, in fact.
Yes, he does. I completely overlooked that. Sorry, guys at home.
So suddenly Federico does have the upper hand for the time being, but is that going to change again? I mean, what's got Joshua holding on to?
He's got a Shaddoll fusion in hand, so he can get potentially another free fusion. We're going to see one card being sent from the deck to the graveyard. I can't believe I missed that. Yeah, it's a Shaddoll and I thought it was a Dark Shaddoll you needed for one of them, but...
They're even more flexible.
Well, this is why I'm sat here and not over there playing.
Well, that is all right. I mean, you learn the most by making mistakes, in my opinion. Like, if you win a tournament and you just expect to win the next tournament the same way, very often you will not.
Yeah, because people learn.
Yeah.
Like, you know, they see this stuff happening and then they...
Whereas when you are making a mistake, you will never, ever make that mistake again. I mean, after anyone has watched the stream yesterday, they will never underestimate a Monarch deck when they play with a Shaddoll deck, for example.
Yeah, because we saw how a massive table twice in a row just got flipped over. I still think Joshua is in a strong position here. I'll show you the options that Joshua has. Shaddoll Fusion, Shaddoll Dragon, Shaddoll Hedgehog, Mathematician in his hand, and Shaddoll Core, Shaddoll Beast, and Mathematician in play. Okay, so we're going to see Mathematician.
So Federico is not playing the Felice Lights 1 Archer tech.
Yeah, it's Shaddoll Falco. That's going to be a bit of insurance for next turn. And the mathematicians will trade. Each player will draw 1 card.
And the question is probably that, because Joshua was quickly looking up at the judge, do I get to flip my card?
Yep. Okay, so turns pass to Joshua. Joshua, a lot of options.
And he finds Vanity's Emptiness. So if he can, once again, put together a strong field, he then has something to back it up. So Federico can't fight back. This was one of the rules of how to play the game. You build your deck, you build your field, special summon a bunch of monsters, activate Vanity's Emptiness, and just watch your opponent try to figure out a way to work around it, and most of the time they fail.
Yeah, because everyone's so dependent on those special summons to answer opponent's special summons at this time that the Vanity's Emptiness is just so powerful. And there's Fleece being sent to the graveyard by the effective mathematician. Let's allow him to special summon it. Has Federico seen a Shaddoll fusion this game? I think he did, right?
No, I think he went for super polymerization twice.
Okay. In which case, destroying the construct then doesn't get him another Shaddoll fusion. That's synchro summon.
That seems like an odd choice. At first I thought that Felice would be tributed for its own effect.
Yeah, that's Arcanite Magician he's summoned. So he'll get 2 spell counters on this card.
But they won't stay there for long.
No, he'll be using this to destroy cards. I'll pull that one up for you because it's one that you guys probably haven't seen.
Yeah,
all the Shaddolls are spellcasters.
It's been a while since we've last seen that card. That was in the good old times of TG Hyperlibrarian.
Yeah. Well, compulsory evacuation device being used by Federico.
But now he is left without a back row, and Joshua is far from being out of options.
Yeah, that Shaddoll fusion.
Got the free Shaddoll fusion, and this might be the time when Federico is like, okay, this game is probably over.
It depends how much the follow-up is. There's a Sinister Shadow Games Vanity's Emptiness to stop his opponent, and he's got a draw effect, and he's got a Shaddoll construct effect if he wants to use that. Oh, he's drawn an Artifact Sanctum, but I know he has been aggressively putting the morale tax.
Yeah, he might be running out of options, targets for
in
that
the graveyard with Shaddoll Fusion. I think he still has 1 left.
I think we've definitely seen 2. I'm not sure about the third one. So Joshua assembled his field, 4 face downs, among them the all-important Vanity's Emptiness.
If you're Joshua here, which one do you attack, the Shaddoll Falco, or do you go smashing in with the construct?
Right, so Federico immediately puts away his construct.
I think he just passed a turn.
Yeah, he just passed the turn and immediately activated the Artifact Sanctum.
Yep, and he didn't have the Shaddoll Fusion in graveyard. I think he's having a quick check.
Is that
for
Allure of Darkness? No.
Yeah, that's Allure of Darkness.
Okay, he didn't have any cards. Activated the Allure, just hoping to draw into the Dark Monster, which is very likely in this particular deck. Found 1. And now he's got 1 more card in hand.
Okay, so he has still got options at this stage, because the Falco is a tuner. And we've got a Serpent as well. Sorry, Collapse Serpent.
Collapse Serpent on the field, together with the Falco. But we know that Joshua has the Vanity's Emptiness face down.
Yeah, so when he flips, there's Vanities, and there's a scoop.
That, causes the scoop in that first game. Not too surprising that the Vanity's Emptiness decided the game at that stage.
Yeah, as soon as the field was established for Joshua, the Vanity's Emptiness taking away the remaining option Federico had.
Yeah.
Now, I completely misjudged a card by misunderstanding the requirements for a fusion monster, which would have been if sitting there, that's the worst thing, to just concede the game.
Yes, that is true.
I'd be going, okay, so I've not understood how my cards work. And
well, it was quite
conceded.
interesting to see Federico considering his move for a very long time. So it certainly seemed like he did have a target and an option to come out of that situation.
Yeah, he would have spotted the concession a lot sooner than I would have, to be honest. But then that comes with a lot of experience of playing in YCSs, and I've not actually played a YCS before. I've been working for Konami the whole time the YCSs have been running, so I've never actually had a chance to sit.
Did you play in one of the larger events that came before the YCS?
I played the national championships and stuff for when you had to qualify for them back
Right.
in the UK, but then I got into judging
Okay.
around the time when the European Championships was introduced.
Yes.
I think 'cause it used to be straight from nationals to the World Championships, and then the European Championships was introduced, and I got into judging before
Okay.
I got there.
Well, that's a long time ago. The European Championship started in 2006.
Wow, time flies.
Yes.
Should we take a look at the side deck options that we've got here? Starting with Federico, he's got 3 Maxi, 3 Chain Disappearance, 3 Mystical Space Typhoon, a Mind Control, 3 Raikos, a Lila, and a Royal Prison, or Royal Poison, it says here.
It looks like a poison, yeah, but it's a prison.
Yes. And on Joshua's side, we've got that's actually his actual deck.
There we go. We got 3 Mystical Space Typhoon, 2 copies of Diffusion. He also runs Super Polymerization, but out of the side deck. 2 copies there. 3 Chain Disappearance, 2 different dimension Ground, 1 Full House, 1 Malevolent Catastrophe, and 1 Lila Lightsworn Sorceress.
Different dimension Ground. Okay, let's
That's
just quickly look that one up. It's
a card we haven't seen this weekend, have we?
no, we've not seen it yet. The Diffusion's also interesting. He's clearly planning to defuse his Dark Paladin and attack directly with Dark Magician and...
So different dimension Ground is basically like dimension... What's it called? It's this turn, any monster sent to the graveyard is removed from play instead. So
okay.
it's only this turn effect. Dimensional Fissure is the card I was looking for, but rather as a trap card and only for 1 turn.
That's interesting. I suppose you use it during your opponent's turn to, or your turn when you're doing all your attacks to take all your opponent's stuff out, or make it. It's actually can strengthen your Super Polymerization to stop your opponent, as we saw before. Joshua hit by Super Polymerization twice in that game, and the first time his monsters just simply replacing themselves.
Yeah. So, will Federico side out the Super Polymerization? I don't think so.
No, I think at this point Joshua's siding his Super Polymerizations in because of being able to use all opponent's monsters.
And the cards in the player's hands are coming up again. First is Joshua. That's his opening hand with a Shaddoll Dragon, Shaddoll Fusion, Shaddoll Falco, Breakthrough Skill, and Blackluster Soldier, Envoy of the Beginning. Whereas Federico's cards are just a second behind, but I think the judge got them, and there they are on the screen for you guys.
Shaddoll Squamata, Shaddoll Falco, Shaddoll Dragon, Super Polymerization, and Sinister Shadow games. Okay, we're going to see a very early Shaddoll Construct, sending the Shaddoll Falco to the graveyard and Blackluster Soldier, and the Construct will then activate Squamata to the graveyard, which then sends the Shaddoll Hedgehog to the graveyard, which then gets 1 more card. I did just see it, and I'm just drawing a blank a moment. I'll just wait until it loads in.
So once again, a good opening for Joshua. Because some of you have pointed out on the Twitch chat that it was the very best opening he had in the first game with Foolish and Sinister Shadow games. Also, we encourage you to vote on our straw poll, where you can vote on who will win that round. We just did that in the rounds before that. It seems like the votes so far, we don't have that many votes casted, but the majority of the people are rooting for Joshua Schmidt here.
So, where do you go from here, looking at your opponent's face down cards? Okay, so that looks like a Shaddoll Squamata has been summoned and it's attacked into Shaddoll Beast. That will allow Joshua to draw 2 cards and send one of the cards in his hand away. He's actually drawn a different dimension ground.
So he did slide it in.
That's quite surprising, actually. I'm really interested in that tech. I wouldn't. That wouldn't have been my.
Yeah, it's a pity we didn't see it in action. It got sent to the graveyard right away.
Yeah. Okay, so it's a Shaddoll Falco being flipped up and Shaddoll Beast being set face down again.
Right.
This is giving Joshua so much, allowing him to get through his deck so fast.
So Federico does have 2 face down cards, but they, well, they actually do something, but not in that particular scenario, do they? He's got a Sinister Shadow Games.
Hey, he's got a Super Polymerization again, and it's just Shaddoll Squamata has just been taken down.
He doesn't want to activate it just now, I guess, because it might give his opponent once again the free Shaddoll Fusion, which Joshua is holding on to, in fact. So it seems like the right call to not activate the Super Polymerization here.
Yeah, depending on his other options. He's got a Shaddoll Dragon, White Dragon, Wife Buster, and Shaddoll Falco in hand.
So what is the play here?
He's got Sinister Shadow Games, and maybe he considers setting the Falco to combo. He's got a few cards in his graveyard with the Sinister Shadow Games. He could make a Synchro-Summon, but again, that just plays straight into his opponent's free Shaddoll Fusion.
And Joshua Schmidt, some people have pointed this out, sometimes he looks a little bit annoyed when he's sitting on the table, but I think it's more like he knows exactly what's going on, so he might be one step ahead of his opponent half the time, and that might be causing him to look in that particular way, where he's like, come on, do something. Just give me something to play with.
He's already considered what his opponent probably has, what moves are available to him, and he's just like, yeah, just go on. Okay, so we're going to see the Super Polymerization.
And Joshua didn't seem surprised there. He's just like putting them away.
Okay.
He's like, yeah, whatever.
And at the same time, it comes at a cost because it triggers the Shaddoll Dragon, but Sinister Shadow Games being chained. Joshua considering.
He seems to be fine with that.
Yeah, he was looking at his different dimensional ground.
Oh, so he's got one more copy.
I don't think he actually discarded it.
Oh.
We might have... I think it's Breakthrough Skill that he discarded.
Right.
I may have missed that.
And that makes a lot more sense, I guess. So we might actually get to see the card in action.
I'm really curious to see if that blows the game wide open.
So yes, this is another thing that some of you who are joining us today on the stream and watching this haven't been playing Yu-Gi-Oh! In like 1 or 2 years.
A lot's changed.
Yeah, a lot has changed. Like, you might be thinking, last time I played, there was Synchro Monsters, then Exceed Monsters were somewhat confusing. Now you're watching the stream and suddenly there are Fusion Monsters on the table and you're just like wondering what happened.
Did we take a step back?
Yeah, exactly. Did we go all the way back to Legend of the Blue Eyes White Dragon?
By the Dragon Charger.
But no, not at all. It is the strength of the Shaddoll deck. The first archetype, I think I can say this, the first archetype that really made Fusion Monsters super viable in the field.
Yeah, for a long time. This is the most powerful Fusion deck we've seen.
But let's not forget Synchro Monsters, because there's one on the field right now. That is a Black Rose Dragon by Federico Zoppini.
It's going to be Breakthrough Skilled when he tries to destroy the entire field. So where does he go from here? He's got a Shaddoll Fusion, Mathematician, and White Dragon, Wyver Buster.
But isn't the Breakthrough Skill from Joshua in the graveyard?
Well, he used it. It was on his field. I think he discarded another one. So he might actually... Okay, let's see if we can go through and figure out what he... Yeah, he's got 2 breakthroughs. No, he must have had 2, discarded one of them.
Right, but he can only activate them when they're in the graveyard on his own turn.
That's correct. So he used the one he had set on the field.
Ah, okay.
Against Black Rose Dragon.
Now it all makes sense. Right. So the Black Rose Dragon staying there without an effect is still a formidable monster, basically.
It's also a rather large liability against a free Shaddoll fusion. Joshua hitting another Shaddoll Beast effect, and he's drawn a Vanity's Emptiness, which is going to make his Shaddoll fusion pretty safe here. It's going to be free, and it's going to be backed up against an opponent's counter fusion.
And Federico, on the other hand, he's out of like cards to set that could keep him in the game when Joshua decides to go big or go home.
Yep. Well, he has got Federico has a Shaddoll fusion to follow up, but we did just see Joshua got the Vanity's Emptiness.
Yes. So once again, this card might prove to be key.
Yeah, we've got a case of ping-pong here, where Joshua's going to go Shaddoll fusion, get his free card, set the Vanityness, and when his opponent tries to respond, just shut him out.
Yes. Federico, you can tell he just like leaned back. He doesn't really want to believe it. What's happening here?
Yeah, he knew it was a possibility when he had the Black Rose Dragon and left it in play.
Yes.
Whenever you leave an extra deck monster on the field against a Shaddoll deck, you have to accept that that's a liability against opposing Shaddoll fusion.
And Joshua Schmidt wasted no time. He drew for his turn and he immediately went for Shaddoll fusion.
He's already considered the sequence of plays. There we are. We're going to see a Morale Tack being sent to the graveyard.
We haven't seen the artifacts that often in Shaddoll this weekend, but it seems to work really well for Joshua Schmidt here.
He's got plenty of light monsters for his El Shaddoll constructs. How many constructs is... a lot. I wonder how many people are asking how many of each fusion you play. He plays 3 El Shaddoll construct, 2 El Shaddoll Winda. I was calling it Winra earlier. I apologize, it is Winda.
Didn't mean to offend the little lady riding a dragon. That's not recommended.
Yeah, the one that stops you special summoning and can't be destroyed by card effects. It's kind of obnoxious.
But now we got the angel with wings on the field. This is how it was first introduced to me.
Really, that's what they came with? Okay.
Yeah, pretty much. They said it looks like an angel with wings. Then again, angels most of the time do have wings.
Yeah, you'd imagine so.
Right, so what is the follow-up for Joshua Schmidt? We should probably look at his hand again.
Yeah, we've got a Mathematician, Sinister Shadow Games, Shaddoll Beast, and Vanity's Emptiness.
So it doesn't commit anything else to the field, it just attacks over the Black Rose Dragon. Vanity's Emptiness is going to go down 100%. And
he tributes the construct to get back the fusion.
So basically, by doing that, he's telegraphing that he doesn't hold onto a Vanity's Emptiness, doesn't he?
Yeah, because that's really interesting, because it denies his opponent the opportunity to play his own Shaddoll fusion and get the most out of it.
That's a very interesting play. And now the different dimension ground might actually come into play because the Mathematician hit play on Federico's side of the field. Joshua activates the ground and that
scoop.
Causes the handshake.
Wow.
The card introduced from the side deck, a unique tech that we haven't seen before this weekend, actually decides this game. That's a huge thing for us.
Just stopping that Mathematician, it just leaves him with an Earth, a White Dragon, Wyver Buster, Sinister Shadow Games, and Shaddoll Fusion are his remaining cards.
Right.
So he just can't do anything with that.
So excellent execution from Joshua Schmidt in this game.
He saw the sequence, and even when he had the Vanity's Emptiness going, okay, I can flip this against that, he still didn't even take that play.
It didn't seem like he was just mind gaming his opponent. He was like, he definitely had a plan going into that move, going with the tribute rather than just relying on the Vanity's Emptiness, because by doing that, there are, I think, 0 outs for Federico in that situation.
he denies him the Shaddoll Fusion, so he can't even activate it without
So even if you had a MST or the double Cyclone that we have seen in Joshua's deck, there's like nothing Federico can do in this situation.
Well, yeah, he ends up, he can't play the Shaddoll Fusion unless he gives up his own resources to do so. And at which point, Joshua still has the Vanity's Emptiness, forcing his opponent to give up resources, countering it that way, as opposed to letting his opponent get the free fusion, stopping it, and then letting your opponent carry on playing other cards.
So Joshua Schmidt, the master of the Shaddolls, in this match, it seemed very, very obvious. We've seen, at first you're going into the match, you think like Shaddoll against Shaddoll, that might not be that exciting, but it was proving us wrong in that regard, in my opinion.
Different dimensional ground. How many of those is he playing?
I think he was just running 2 copies of it. Yes, he's running 2 copies in the side deck, but they must have been for the mirror match. I mean, it's good against anything that runs Mathematician.
Yes, because just shutting out that Mathematician, it stops the entire sequence of plays there. And you can do it when your opponent plays Shaddoll Fusion, so all their cards get banished, so you're not getting all of those. Even a free fusion just becomes a 1-card extra deck monster, as opposed to extra deck monster destroying your cards, special summoning cards.
So what does the card do against, let's say, Burning Abyss?
Stops all of them going to the graveyard, which stops them all triggering. So if you destroy Dante in that turn, Dante gets banished, doesn't get you anything back. The Burning Abyss materials, they go to the they get banished, get you nothing back. So it's very, very powerful against Burning Abyss.
Yeah, and the same with Satellanites.
Yeah, you can shut down the D-Nub in Altuair plays. I'm really impressed by that. I wouldn't have expected it when a lot of people...
It's the first time we've seen the card this weekend.
Like Rick Cherry playing Dimensional Fissure yesterday, which backfired. This is specifically this type of card can't backfire because it's only for one turn.
That's one of the most interesting things we've seen this weekend. Rick Cherry, who was playing Shaddolls, was going up against, I don't even remember 100%.
No, he was playing Satellanites, and
he was
playing against Shaddolls.
Shaddolls, yes. And so he introduces the Dimensional Fissure from his side, like a one-off copy, so he might not have played with it that often during his testing process, because you don't see it every once in a while when you only run
you look
one
at the card
copy.
and go, well, this is good against X, Y, and Z.
So it reads great on, in theory, it sounds like a great idea. Goes to play the card, opponent flips a Stygian Dirge, and with no rank 3s in Rick's extra deck. I had a conversation with him after the match, like 2 rounds later, and he was still obsessing over that match. He was like, yeah, it's really unfortunate. And I asked him, so why did you not run any rank 3s in your extra deck? And he just said, well, space is tight.
Yeah.
So
you know, that's just a risk he took. He said, my opponent plays the card, I'm going to be in a bad spot, I'm going to draw Mystical Space Typhoon. It didn't work out. The way the lockout cards overlapped, it came down to his opponent, whose name I can't remember right now, just had the bigger monsters.
Yes.
That was what was winning the game. It was just big attack, big attack.
However, one of the stories, we had quite a few veterans yesterday in the feature matches, and some of them took rough beatings, as we just pointed out. Among them, Rick Cherry, first round, Luca Cittoni, also a player that went to the top 32 of several YCS before. And at the end of day one, they were among the very top of the standings, so they bounced back. They recovered from their early losses.
They walked away from that, and they didn't go on tilt, which is where you make a mistake, you obsess about it, it causes you to create more mistakes, and then you knock yourself out of the tournament. And they just kept in the right mindset, and I think all of them are still on a very good record towards the top cut. Well, not all of them, but some of them are still in competition.
It's definitely one of the recurring themes. When you have a player who is gifted, he starts out, he learns more about the game. That's the first step. And then at some point, when you are among the top 10% of all the players in the game, there's only so much you can do to overcome your opponent, like outplay him. And what it comes down to very, very often is a mental advantage. And we see this in the groups that are formed, where one player who has been at that very top spot before is telling the other guys, hey, the most important lesson for you to take away from this after he messed up in a game is to not obsess over it and just walk away from it, take it one game at a time, and then the next game you can come back.
Yeah. As duelists, you're all as good as the total number of games you've played against people. Regardless of the skill levels of your opponents, you're only as good as many games as you've played and that you've learned from. Even if you're playing against an opponent that you would consider perhaps not as experienced as yourself, you still learn the mindset of a player in that skill bracket, and how to use certain elements of your knowledge to overcome these matchups. So you still learn something even playing against a less experienced player if you're sitting with a long stream of records. And it's never fair to sort of say to these players, oh yeah, he was terrible, because that's not true. If you're still learning from it, it's still valuable matches.
It also does make for an interesting read. When you read a tournament report where somebody's going like, round 1, I 2-0'd my opponent, round 2, I 2-0'd my opponent, you're not going to take anything away from it. It's a lot different when somebody's like, this is the mistake I made, don't make it yourself.
Yes.
We'll be back shortly. The field has been trimmed down, so in just no time we will be back with you for round 9 of the